Greetings from everyone at North Frontenac Little Theatre. What you are about to see and hear is a dramatic reading of Charles Dickens' classic story, A Christmas Carol. Published over 150 years ago, its message of greed and redemption still resonates today. This is the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, that miserly, mercenary old man whose answer to anything socially responsible is,
bah, humbug.
Of course, Dickens doesn't let Scrooge get away with this attitude. He is visited by 3 ghosts on Christmas Eve who help him see the error of his ways.
The poor are not my business. It's enough for a man to understand his own business, not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. If the poor would rather die than go to a workhouse, then they'd better do it and decrease the surplus population.
So imagine, if you will, London in the mid-1800s, a city of 2.5 million where most of the population lived in abject poverty. Where the average lifespan of the poor was just 37 years, where the wealthy earned 3,000 times the yearly salary of Scrooge's clerk, Bob Cratchit. Where a person could spend the rest of their days in the workhouse for not paying a bill. That is, if they first didn't die of cholera, typhoid, smallpox, or tuberculosis. Marley was dead. There is no doubt whatever about that. The clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner signed the register of his burial. Scrooge signed it. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. You will therefore permit me to repeat that Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residuary legatee, his sole friend and sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, though he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood, years afterwards, above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge, and sometimes Marley, but he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire. Secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what time it was. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired of Scrooge the way to such and such a place. But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance, was what the knowing ones call nuts to Scrooge. Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy as well, and he could hear the people in the courtyard outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breasts and stamping their feet upon the pavement stones to warm them. The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day, and candles were flaring in the windows of the neighboring offices, like ruddy smears about the conspicuous brown air. The fog came pouring in at every chink and keyhole, and was so dense that although the courtyard was of the narrowest, the houses opposite were mere phantoms. The door of Scrooge's office was open that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who in a dismal little cell beyond, a sort of enclosed tank, was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room, and so surely as the clerk came in with a shovel, the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part company.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you.
Bah, humbug.
It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, Fred, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first indication he had of his approach.
Christmas? A humbug? Uncle, you don't mean that, I'm sure.
I do. Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry? What reason do you have to be merry? You're poor enough.
Come then, what right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough.
Bah, humbug.
Don't be cross, Uncle.
What else can I be when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas. Bah upon Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older, but not an hour richer. A time for balancing your books and having every item in them through a round dozen of months presented dead against you. If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should. Nephew, keep Christmas in your way and let me keep it in mine.
Ah, keep it, but you don't keep it.
Let me leave it alone then. How much good would it do to you? Much good has it ever done?
Oh, there are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say. Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time, when it has come around, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of, in the long calendar of the year, when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely, and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe it has done me good, and will do me good, and I say, God bless it.
Let me hear another sound from you, Cratchit, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir. I wonder you didn't go into Parliament.
Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us on the morrow.
Come indeed. I need no family to haunt me.
But, Uncle, why?
Why indeed? Why did you get married?
Well, because I fell in love.
Oh, because you fell in love. Good afternoon.
But, Uncle, you never came to see me before my marriage. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?
Good afternoon.
I want nothing from you. Uncle, ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?
Good afternoon.
I am sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel to which I have been a party, but I have made the trip here in honor to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So, a Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Good afternoon.
And a Happy New Year.
Good afternoon.
His nephew left the room without an angry word.
Merry Christmas to you, Mr. Cratchit.
Merry Christmas to you, sir.
His clerk, Bob Cratchit, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let 2 other people in.
Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night.
We have no doubt his generosity is well represented by his surviving partner. Here are our credentials.
Oh, humbug. Here are your credentials back, gentlemen.
At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at the present time.
Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir.
Are there no prisons?
Plenty of prisons.
And the union workhouses, are they still in operation?
They are. Still, I wish I could say they were not.
The treadmill and the poor law, are they in full vigor then?
Both very busy, sir.
I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it.
Under the impression that they are scarcely furnishing Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude, a few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time because at this time of all others, when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?
Nothing.
You wish to be anonymous.
I wish to be left alone. Since you asked me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those are badly off must go there.
Many can't go there, and many would rather die.
If they would rather die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population.
But, sir,
The poor are not my business. It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
can we not put you down for something?
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Merry Christmas to you, sir.
Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. Scrooge returned to his labors with an improved opinion of himself and in a more teasing temper than was usual with him. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so, and the cold became intense. In the main street at the corner of the courtyard, some laborers were repairing the gas pipes, and had lit a great fire in a cast iron pan, around which a party of ragged men and boys were gathered, warming their hands and winking their eyes before the blaze in rapture. The day progressed, foggier yet and colder. Piercing, searching, biting cold. The older of one scant young nose gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold, as bones are gnawed by dogs, stooped down to to entertain him with a Christmas carol.
God bless you, merry gentlemen, may nothing you dismay. Remember Christ our Savior was born on Christmas Day, to save us all from Satan's power when we were gone astray. Oh, tidings of comfort.
Hey! Bah, humbug.
At length, the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and by example admitted the fact to the expectant clerk in the tank that the working day had come to an end.
You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose.
If quite convenient, sir.
It's not convenient and it's not fair. If I was to hold back half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound. And yet, you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
It's only once a year, sir.
Oh, a poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. Oh, but I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning.
Yes, sir. Certainly, sir. Thank you, sir, and Merry Christmas to you.
Bah.
Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no warm overcoat, went down a slide on Cornhill Lane like a boy a quarter of his age, in honor of it being Christmas Eve, and then ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could pelt to play a blind man's bluff with his children.
Hey, kid, out of my way!
Merry Christmas, Mr. Scrooge!
Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern. And having read all the newspapers and spent the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. Scrooge lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy suite of rooms, old enough now and dreary enough, for nobody lived in the building but Scrooge, the other rooms being all let out as offices. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, had to grope with his hands to get through it. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It was also a fact that Scrooge had seen it, night and morning, during his whole residence in that place. Also, that Scrooge had as little of what is called imagination about him as any man in the city of London. Marley's face, not an impenetrable shadow as the other objects in the yard were, but it had a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. To say that he was not startled would be untrue. He did pause for a moment before he shut the door, and he did look cautiously behind first, as if he half expected to be terrified, but there was nothing on the back of the door, except the screws and nuts that held the knocker on. Sounded through the house like thunder. Every room above and every cask in the wine merchant's cellars below appeared to have a separate peal of echoes of its own. But Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes.
Bah, humbug.
Before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, spare room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the bed. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers, and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. It was a very low fire indeed, nothing on such a bitter night. He was obliged to sit close to it and brood over it before he could extract the least sensation of warmth from such a handful of fuel. The fireplace was as an old one, built by some Dutch merchant long ago, and paved all around with quaint Dutch tiles designed to illustrate the scriptures. If each smooth tile had been a blank, his memory would have conjured up a copy of old Marley's head on every one. Scrooge walked across the room. After several turns, he sat down again. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell. A disused bell that hung in the room and communicated for some purpose now forgotten with a chamber in the highest story of the building. It was with great astonishment and with a strange, inexplicable dread that as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing.
Humbug.
This might have lasted half a minute or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun, together.
Bah.
They were succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door.
It's humbug still. I won't believe it.
It was the same face, the very same. It came on through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes.
How now? What do you want with me?
Much.
Who are you?
Ask me who I was.
Who were you then? You're particular for a shade.
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
Can you sit down?
I can.
Do it then.
You don't believe in me.
I don't.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because little things affect me. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whoever you are. You see this toothpick?
I do.
You're not looking at it.
But I see it nevertheless.
Well, humbug, I tell you, humbug.
Whoa!
Oh, mercy, dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?
Man of the worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?
I do, I must, but why do spirits walk the earth and why do they come to me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world. Oh, woe is me! It must witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turn to happiness. Whoa!
You are chained. Tell me why.
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on my own free will, and of my own free will I wear it. Is its pattern strange to you? Or would you know the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was full, as heavy, and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain.
Jacob, oh Jacob Marley, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob.
I have none to give. It comes from other regions, Ebenezer Scrooge, and is conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men. Nor can I tell you what I know. A very little more is all permitted to me. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. And mark me, in life my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole, and weary journeys lie before me.
You must have been very slow about it, Jacob.
Slow?
7 years dead and traveling all the time?
The whole time. No rest, no peace, relentless torture of no remorse.
You travel fast?
On the wings of the wind.
You might have got over a great quantity of ground in 7 years.
Oh, captive bound and double chained, not to know that ages of constant labor must pass into eternity before the good of which it is capable of is all developed. Oh, not to know that any Christian spirit working kindly in its little sphere, wherever, whatever it may be, will find its mortal life too short for its vast means of usefulness. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one's life's opportunity missed. Yet such was I. Oh, such was I.
But you were always a good man of business, Jacob.
Business? Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were all but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. At this time of year, of the changing year, I suffer most. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down, and never raise them to that blessed star which led the wise men to a poor abode? Were there no poor homes to which its light would have conducted me? Oh! Ah, hear me, Ebenezer Scrooge. My time is nearly gone.
I will, but don't be too hard on me. Don't be flowery. Jacob, please.
How it is that I appear before you in a shape that you can see, I may not tell. I have sat invisible beside you many and many a day. That is no light part of my penance. I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and a hope of escaping my fate. A chance and a hope of my procuring, Ebenezer.
You were always a good friend to me, thank you.
You will be haunted by 3 spirits.
Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob?
It is.
I think I'd rather not.
Hear me! Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow, when the bell tolls 1.
Couldn't I take them all at once and have it over, Jacob?
Expect the second on the next night, at the same hour. The third upon the next night, when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake you remember what has passed between us.
Humbug! Nonsense!
Whether it was from the emotion he had undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, he went straight to bed. And fell asleep instantly.